Well, Atlanta is back to their SEC media bag days for day 2, and some of those contenders like Georgia, who was the king of the hill a couple years ago, trying to run it back and get back to the top of the hill. Others outside of that, Texas, Steve Sarkisian and the crew, a different quarterback. The Arch Manning era has begun, along with Josh Pate in Tennessee, different quarterback there. But Hugh Freeze, year 3, what are you going to do with the Tigers? These are the 4 coaches and selected players we'll hear from today in Atlanta. And of course, a lot of spice coming from these 4 as usual we see throughout the regular season, but we get a little early later on today. Join us now, our guys, Damien Harris and Josh Pate, still there in the ATL to break down what we expect to see. And guys, I just mentioned there some of those contenders, but let's start there with Georgia, because when you think about it, you have Beck out, Stockton in. When you think about 2 championships back-to-back outside of that, this team, I'm curious for you, Damien, what are your storylines for the Dogs coming into 2025?
Well, I think Gunnar Stockton is obviously going to be the biggest storyline. We saw that he was able to step in for Carson Beck last year during the SEC championship. He handled business against Texas. He showed a lot of grit. He showed a lot of determination, a lot of toughness. But, again, we're having this conversation with a lot of up-and-coming starting quarterbacks. It's a lot different whenever the best defensive coordinators with the best defensive players in the country have a full offseason to get ready to prepare for you. So, for me, Georgia needs to get back to being a team that is committed to running the football, regardless of who in the stadium knows they're going to run the football. You've got a great back in Nate Frazier. He spelled ETN a lot last year, rushed for over 600 yards, 8 touchdowns. Like, this is a guy that can be a bell cow workhorse back for Kirby Smart. I think if you implement him, that takes some of the pressure off of Gunnar Stockton, lets him play more carefree, not thinking that he has to make all the big decisions, make all the big plays. So I think that's going to be a big storyline for Georgia. If they can be more balanced on offense, I think they got a shot to be some contenders this year.
I think when you're looking at the makeup, all right, I think you would agree with me, it is totally unfair to look at Gunnar Stockton and say that's the guy that's got to carry them.
Absolutely.
That is the kind of quarterback that needs to work complementary off of, like you just said, a power ground game, which we used to be able to count on Georgia to have, and a plus to dominant defense, which we also used to rely on Georgia to have. They were absent in both of those things. Mind you, they weren't terrible defensively last year, but Kirby Smart himself has admitted several times, like, we weren't ourselves last year. They were in the 100s in rushing statistics last year. Now, here's the follow-up to that. They still won the SEC, which is just kind of crazy to say. But that was a team that was below national championship caliber because of the things we're talking about. So with Gunnar Stockton, I think all of that kind of works hand in hand, maybe even like downstream a little bit from the answer to your question. Can they run the ball? Like, can they get stops on third downs defensively like they used to be able to do?
Turnover on both sides there, but 7 returning starters when you talk about the Dogs on offense and defense. Over in Auburn there, you're thinking of year 3 of Hugh Freeze, and you guys know this best. When you get to that 3 or 4 year mark, we need to see something here. Jackson Arnold, maybe the combination between those 2 there may be the key. But Josh, your thoughts, what are you watching for them in the fall?
Yeah, so the one thing you need to know is, as Hugh Freeze has talked about this team leading up to today, as he's already talked today, he's not shying away from expectation, which is kind of interesting because no one knows his team better than he does. But I've listened to several people here already today, Damien, ask him, you know, do you think expectations are fair? Do you think you still need another year? And he's almost cutting people off saying, no, absolutely they're fair. No, we've got the players to win this year. And I'm like, okay, that means we're going to save that tape for November. And if you're 10-2, great. But if you're 6-6, 7-5, you can't either yourself or via proxy talk about how, well, we needed another year. Well, we knew in August we weren't going to be quite to the level. No. You're telling me you're at that level. And then the follow-up is you bring Jackson Arnold in. You as a team were turnover prone last year. He as a player was turnover prone last year. In a perfect world, you just cancel all that out. He comes in. It's a perfect marriage. But, again, that's in a perfect world. This is the SEC. It's more the real world. Absolutely. And that's why they open at Baylor on a Friday night. You talk about a game out of all the games in week 1, I know the least about what to expect from. It's that one.
Yeah, and you make a lot of good points. And I love that you're focusing on all the on-the-field optics. I'm going to talk about something that's off the field. And we can sit here and talk about, we don't have a problem with Hugh Freeze admitting that he likes to play golf.
Sure.
We can admit that. Brandon Baylor back at the office, he can admit.
Even you've become a golfer.
Yeah, even I, like, as an up-and-coming golfer myself, I respect the hustle. But the main job of a head coach outside of developing young men is eliminating and mitigating outside distractions. And all this media storm, we're in the middle of SEC Media Day, and a lot of the conversation that we're talking about with Hugh Freeze, outside of what you just said, is about his comments about playing golf. What is the level of preparedness going to be for that week 1 game against Baylor when there's going to be a lot of unexpected things that come up? So again, it's not necessarily that it's a problem, but again, whenever you've got all these things, a new quarterback, you were turnover prone last year, the expectations are at an all-time high. You could be on the hot seat by the end of this season. You don't want to have external factors revolving around your team about something as small as a game of golf.
Yeah, and to provide context, like to someone who's watching this, they may not be following this day to day. I mean, yeah, like Hugh Freeze is no stranger to a golf course, but the real problem maybe an Auburn fan has with it is we're coming off what we just came off. I see you on the golf course more than I do in the office. Not that that's true. That's the perception. And here's the hammer home point. You got to go, like when you pull up the top recruiting rankings, you got to click next. You got to go past the top 50 to even find Auburn's class right now. While you watch Texas and Georgia battling out for a 5-star today, you watch Bama roll in, and Auburn fans are looking around saying, wait a second. Hey, man, if we're flying at 38,000 feet, we're at cruising altitude is one thing, but we're not. And so that's why results are so imperative this year, because it's mandatory for him to keep his job, obviously, but for them to salvage any kind of, like, meaningful recruiting class, they got to deliver results, because a lot of these kids are already committed elsewhere now.
And just the last point to add to what you just said, because you said it very well, if Auburn doesn't have that 10-2 season like you said, if they start out 1-2, then every Auburn fan is going to be talking about, see, this is why Hugh Freeze shouldn't have been out playing golf.
By the way, the 78th recruiting class, you guys point out there when it comes to that, if you're Hugh Freeze, you can't chip and putt your way in the SEC. They were 2 and 6 there. Tennessee. Look, you know, there's some change over there. No Nico. You got Joey Aguilar there. This is a team that was in the CFP a season ago. When you talk about a team that needs to take that leap, what do we need to see from Tennessee here, Dave?
Well, first of all, I want to start by saying I feel like I've already seen a little bit of a leap from this Tennessee team under the leadership of Josh Heupel, because he set a very clear precedent, a very clear message to his team. Nobody is bigger than the University of Tennessee football program. Not one player, not a coach, not an individual, nobody. So if Nico wants to do whatever it is that Nico wants to do, then fine. We're going to find somebody else that wants to step in and play starting quarterback for the University of Tennessee. Now, as a guy who played and won national championships at Alabama, who used to dog on Tennessee left and right, I have a new level of respect for the University of Tennessee program, because you don't see that, especially in today's age and era of college football. Coaches are a little afraid of how they handle their player interaction.
Of it,
I wanted to mince my words. They're terrified. They're petrified of these young kids because of the power that they have. Well, not in Knoxville. Josh Heupel has put his foot down. He gathered his team and he said, look, I need a group of young men that are willing to get out of themselves into this team, because like you said, Brandon, this was a college football playoff team last year. Now, you have clearly the components to get back there. As long as you've got the guys to buy in, you've got the locker room under control like it seems Josh Heupel has, I think they've got just as good of a chance as anybody.
So the view I have on this Tennessee team is if it's a game that's played on paper, their roster is not at a place for this particular year where they compare to Bama, LSU, Georgia, Texas. They're a step off that pace. They were going to be with Nico, candidly.
Yes.
But without Nico, what you make it about is you make it about a lot more than just the game on paper. Like, it's going to be an ultimate sort of man-maker season.
Yes.
It's going to be a program-defining season for them, because like, you know actually better. I was going to say you know as well as I do. You know better than I do. There's this intangible thing that happens when you know, like, your leadership, your coach has your back above any one individual. There's no favoritism that's being shown. What you want to do is you want to go to war for that guy.
Yes.
All right, so then you add on the fact that everybody, maybe even me included, is expecting you to be down a notch because of attrition, including at the quarterback position, and you go into wounded animal mode, man. You get backed into a corner, and organizationally, like, this is where they got a shot to coach their tails off, and they got a shot to just, like, bubblegum and paperclip their way perceptionally to a 9-win season maybe. And you look at it at the end and you say, They were young this year. They got the #1 quarterback in the country committed for next year. Like, what could this thing be set up to do? And ironically, Damien, I think, like, they can miss the playoff this year and impress me more than last year's team did making the playoff when it comes to, like, defining what that program is.
No, absolutely. And everything you just said, like, that's what I'm talking about. That togetherness, that camaraderie that Josh Heupel is building, that's gonna do things that X's and O's can't. That's gonna get you in positions to win games that on paper, like you're saying, okay, well, we don't stack up with Alabama, we don't stack up with Georgia or Texas, but if we just play together, if we just rely on each other, and like you said, have that wounded animal with our backs in the corner, we just fight together, you win a lot of those games.
Well, you guys talk about wounded animals. I don't think Texas feels that way because finally we get the Arch Manning era underway. We've been waiting for this for almost like 3 years since he stepped on the scene there in Austin. And Josh, I'm just curious because I know you've talked about this a lot, building up to this moment. We're going to see him grow throughout the season. We're going to see Steve Sarkisian kind of teach him along the way and build him up to the quarterback we expect him to be. But what are you watching with this group as they also try to contend in the SEC?
Well, so, I mean, anyone's fooling you and themselves if they start talking about anything other than Arch Manning when they lead with Texas. So the one thing I'm interested in is sometimes, Damien, you start as a true freshman, and people say, hey, how good can you be out of the gate? Like, it's going to be a sharp learning curve, this and that. He's not a true freshman. He's not even a second-year player. He's been there 3 years now. It's not going to be the first time he's ever taken snaps at Texas. He's done it sparingly. My point there is, if we believe that kid is supremely mature, and I do, if we believe he's supremely talented, I do, if we believe he's got among the best in the world at developing and then calling an offensive strategy / game plan in Sark, and I do, I wonder, how fast can he be running right out of the gate? And then the follow-up is, all right, you've had to replenish at the defensive tackle position a couple of cycles in a row now. How good are you there? How good can you run the ball? Are you along the lines of scrimmage what you claim you should be with the way you recruit every year? But with Arch, like, out of all these unknown or unproven commodities at quarterback, I don't think you nor I ever envision a world where Ty Simpson or Gunnar Stockton are playing at like a Heisman caliber level in November. If he's everything we think he is, he's got the ability to take over games. He's got the ability to be the face of the sport. That's not setting the expectation for him. That's just saying, I mean, there's a reason Steve Sarkisian recruited him and was so excited when he landed it. And I think it has a little bit more to do with his skill set than just his last name's Manning.
And I agree with all of that. And I expect Arch to come out of the gate hot because Steve Sarkisian knows everything that you just said. That's one thing that people don't realize behind the camera. These coaches, they spend more time with these players than their parents at this point in their lives. Steve Sarkisian knows that he's got a smart, talented, potentially generational college football quarterback. So what do you do with that? You open up the playbook week 1 against Ohio State. You're not calling plays to just get him in a rhythm early. You're not calling plays just to get him easy access throws, 5-yard out routes, screens, wide receiver tunnel screens, bubbles, things like that. You were opening up the playbook. You were giving Arch Manning the keys because we all believe, and I'm sure Steve Sarkisian, who's been around him every single day, believes that as well. My only concern for Texas is going to be replacing Kelvin Banks on the offensive line because one thing that we've noticed watching Texas the past couple of years, as great of a quarterback as Quinn could have been at times, he was banged up a lot. He had a lot of issues. He had his back turned to the defense. He was moving around. Now, granted, Arch is a lot more mobile. He can break down defenses better with his legs. But at the end of the day, this potential generational quarterback that we're talking about, most importantly, you've got to protect him.
By the way, he comes with what the kids call nowadays aura. That's the new thing. He has this aura there for Texas, so we'll see how that shines in 2025. Damien, Josh, appreciate it as always, and we'll see you guys, of course, after today, leading into tomorrow. But take a look at those odds when it comes to the SEC. Yes, you got 220 there along with the Dogs. You got Texas and Georgia. Then we find Damien's old stomping grounds of Bama at plus 490. LSU at 7-1, and Texas A&M rounded out the top 5 to win it all in the Super Conference when it comes to the SEC.